He didn't even look at me when I set the box down. Just stared ahead, like he hadn't spent 10 years learning my face. I spent 2 months planning something unforgettable. Turns out, they beat me to it. My name is Aaron. I'm 38 years old. I used to think that love, real love, was proven in the little things, not just flowers or big gestures, but remembering his favorite breakfast, noticing when he was overwhelmed, choosing to be kind even when you're tired. Turns out, I wasn't the only one paying attention. And not all love stories are sabotaged by strangers. Sometimes, it's the people who smile in your wedding photos who rewrite the ending. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like and the subscribe button. Josh and I met in a way that felt quiet. No fireworks, no whirlwind, just a steady unfolding, like two people who were already tired of pretending. I was 29, working long hours as a pediatric nurse. He was 31, teaching high school English and helping his brother with the family flooring business on weekends. We met at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. While everyone else drank and laughed loudly around the fire pit, we sat on a cold bench, talking about books and childhood dogs. I remember thinking, this is the kind of man who listens. And for a while, that was true. We built our life modestly. We rented a small one-bedroom apartment and bought mismatched furniture off Craigslist. We cooked simple dinners. On Sunday mornings, he'd make coffee before I woke up and leave the mug on the bathroom sink because he knew I always forgot to brew it. There wasn't grand romance, but there was consistency, trust, familiarity. Until his family got more involved. The first time I met his mother, I wore a pale blue dress. Josh said it was her favorite color, and I wanted to make a good impression. She smiled politely, complimented the pie I brought, and then said, I suppose she's quiet, like you were. In high school, I wasn't sure if that was praise or a warning. His sister, Megan, was louder, bolder. She had a career in marketing, a perfect condo, and a knack for delivering compliments that felt off. Wow, Aaron, she once said, scanning me up and down, you really make natural look good. I wish I could get away with not trying so hard. I laughed. But I remember looking at my reflection later and wondering if I should have worn lipstick. It was small things like that, subtle, at dinners. Josh's mother would ask about my job, then interrupt before I finished. That must be hard, she'd say, turning to Megan. Remember when you had that cough for 2 weeks and Aaron said it was just allergies? I was always being slightly corrected, slightly doubted, slightly minimized. Josh didn't notice at first. Or maybe, he did and thought ignoring it would make it go away. He'd change the subject, pour another drink, or lean over and kiss my hand under the table like I should take it as reassurance. I told myself it didn't matter. That families are complicated. That if I just gave it time, they'd soften. So, I baked his mother's favorite pear tart for her birthday, even though I was on call that night. I listened to Megan's stories about her career even when they turned into monologues. I learned how his family celebrated Christmas down to the exact shade of wrapping paper they preferred, and I followed it. Even if it meant folding myself a little smaller each year, because I loved him. And I believed, truly believed, that was enough. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel outnumbered. There were dinners where I'd walk into a room and feel it shift. Conversations that stopped just a little too suddenly, jokes that hung in the air without context, followed by quick glances I wasn't supposed to catch. I remember one night, just before Thanksgiving, walking into the kitchen and hearing Megan say, she just doesn't get us. She didn't see me, or maybe she did. She didn't stop talking either way. Josh would tell me I was overthinking things. That his family was just weird with outsiders at first. That they were trying. That I needed to relax, so I did what I always did. I tried harder. I started planning his 40th birthday almost 3 months in advance. He had mentioned just once that he wished he could reconnect with his college roommates. So I found them. Emailed them, coordinated travel. Reserved the private room at his favorite restaurant. I made a memory book. Contacting people from his past, asking them to send letters or notes. I printed photos, bought decorations. Even had his favorite band, a local folk duo, agree to play 2 songs. It was the kind of party he never would have asked for, but the kind of love I thought I was supposed to give. And I told myself foolishly, maybe that this would be the moment they saw me. Really saw me. Not the quiet nurse. Not the outsider, but the woman who loved their son. I even invited his family. I imagined the toast I'd give. How I'd thank them for raising such a good man. I didn't know, then, what they were whispering behind my back. That while I was printing menus and coordinating flights, they were building something else entirely. Planning the party became my quiet obsession. Every spare moment I had outside of work was filled with phone calls, emails, handwritten notes. I kept it all organized in a pale green folder I hid in the drawer beneath my scarves. Josh's college roommates were the first to respond. One of them, Peter, lived in Seattle now. He said he'd fly down, no question. Another, Marcus, was living just an hour away and offered to help with logistics. I remember one afternoon when I stepped into the bedroom while on the phone with Peter, discussing catering options. Josh walked in just as I said, "It has to be a surprise. Don't tell anyone I contacted you." He raised an eyebrow. I smiled, hung up, and said it was nothing, just planning something for a friend. He didn't press at the time. I thought that meant trust. Looking back now, I realize it may have just meant distance. I kept the receipts in an envelope tucked behind my jewelry box. The restaurant reservation, the deposit for the band, the stationery order. Little pieces of something beautiful I was building. But things started to shift. Subtly at first, his mother, who never used emojis, began sending me oddly warm texts with too many smiley faces. Megan started complimenting me on random things, my shoes, my hair, the way I arranged the living room throw pillows. It was like they were reading from a manual labeled, "How to Act Normal When You're Hiding Something." One evening at dinner, his mother leaned over and said, "You've been so busy lately. We hardly see you anymore. Long nights, lots of calls. Everything okay?" I told her work had been hectic. She gave a slow nod and said, "Just make sure you're not neglecting what really matters." Then she looked at Josh. Not me. That was the first time my stomach turned. Not because I knew what was coming, but because, somehow, I knew it had already begun. Josh started coming home late. Not that it was unusual, he had after-school duties sometimes, but there was a new stiffness to him. His hugs were shorter. He'd ask how my day was, but not listen to the answer. He didn't kiss my shoulder in the morning anymore. He used to. Every day once I reached for his hand while we were watching TV, and he moved it just slightly to adjust the remote. He didn't even notice he'd done it. I told myself he was stressed. That maybe he had picked up on my planning and was pretending not to notice. That maybe, just maybe, he was planning something of his own, and we were going to accidentally surprise each other on the same night. But deep down, I felt it. The edge, the emotional glass I was walking on. One Thursday night, I came home early from work and found him in the kitchen with his phone screen still lit, his expression blank. He locked it too quickly, too casually. I asked what he wanted for dinner. He said he wasn't hungry. The next morning, the green folder was on the counter. Open, my heart stopped. Inside were printed emails, guest lists, handwritten notes about dietary restrictions, and surprise toasts. I had left it in the drawer. I was sure I had. He was sitting on the couch, not looking at me. His jaw clenched the way it did when he'd already made up his mind about something. "I saw the messages," he said quietly, "the ones from Peter and Marcus, and the receipts, the calls. You've been lying for weeks." I blinked. The room tilted. "Josh," I started. "I was planning." "I don't care what you were planning," he interrupted. "You kept all of this from me. You said you were working late. You lied." "I was planning a surprise," I said, my voice small. But even as I said it, I knew he didn't believe me. Worse. He didn't want to believe me. He stood up and walked to the kitchen, pulled something from a drawer, and tossed it on the table. It was a photo. A screenshot, me at a coffee shop with Marcus. I was holding my phone, laughing at something he said. It looked worse than it was. It always does, when you're looking for confirmation. "I got this from Megan," he said. "She said she saw you there. So I asked her to check." His voice cracked. Not with sadness, but with something colder. "I don't know who you are anymore, Aaron." And in that moment, I didn't know who he was either. Because the man I loved would have asked. The silence between us was deafening. I tried to explain. I even opened the folder again, showing him the menu selections, the names of his friends, the reservation form, his favorite band's name circled in red ink. But he just stood there, arms crossed. "I can't pretend anymore," he said finally. "I'm not coming to the party. I don't want a celebration built on lies." And then he left the room. Not with anger, not even with grief. just absence. That was the part that broke me. Not the suspicion, not the betrayal, but how easily he let me become a stranger. I was 9 the first time. I understood what it meant to be unbelieved. It happened in the school library. A book had gone missing, one of those glossy hardcovers about sea animals that everyone liked flipping through because of the fold-out pages and pop-up sharks. I didn't even like ocean things, but I was the last one seen near the shelf, and someone whispered they saw me slip it into my backpack. I hadn't. Of course, I hadn't. The librarian asked me gently, and I said no. I told the truth. But I remember the way she looked at me, not angry, just disappointed, like she didn't want to accuse me, but had already decided it was easier to assume. She called my parents. They believed her. My dad was quiet. My mom was tired. I didn't cry. I just felt erased. The book turned up 2 days later in the boys' restroom trash bin. No apology came. No one said, "We were wrong." They just moved on, but I didn't. I learned that being calm makes people suspicious. That staying quiet looks like hiding something. That explaining yourself only makes you seem more guilty. So I did what a lot of girls do when they're blamed for things they didn't. I tried harder? I became the good kid, the helper, the fixer. I ironed my school uniforms without being asked. Cleaned dishes before my parents got home. Let my little brother blame things on me if it meant avoiding another late-night shouting match. Because I thought if I was good enough, if I was soft, small, helpful, people would stop doubting me. That habit didn't leave me as I got older. In college, I was the one who always brought snacks to study groups, who made sure everyone had rides home, who stayed late to help professors stack chairs. Even in my friendships, I chose to be the listener. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who offered to dog sit, who gave rides to the airport without being asked twice. There's a kind of peace in being needed, but it's a dangerous place to build your worth. When I met Josh, I thought maybe finally I had found someone who saw through all of that. Someone who didn't need me to overperform to believe I was good. He once told me, early on, "You don't have to impress me, just be here." I believed him. For years, and then, when he stood across from me in our kitchen, looking at that photo with eyes already closed to reason, it felt like I was 9 again. It felt like the library, like the room full of silence and side eyes, like I had failed some invisible test I didn't know I was taking. Only this time, the person who didn't believe me was the person I thought would never doubt my heart. And that was the part that made everything collapse. Not just what he believed, but how little it took to make him believe it. I hadn't changed. But somehow, in their version of the story, I had become someone else. And once again, I found myself alone, calm, quiet, and completely misunderstood. The day of the party arrived, and the weather felt oddly still. Not bright, not stormy, just suspended. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, curling a piece of my hair, then letting it fall untouched. I didn't know what I was preparing myself for. Celebration, closure, a collapse. But I had made a decision. I was going through with it, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because this was something I had created. With care, with heart, and, even if he didn't want to see it, others would. The private room at the restaurant was perfect. Soft lighting, long linen-draped tables, a wall lined with photos from his childhood to now. I had spent weeks putting together that collage, old birthday hats, his senior prom photo, a faded postcard he once sent to his college roommate. His best friend, Rob, was the first to arrive. He walked in, took one look around, and pulled me into a hug. "Aaron," he said, eyes wide, "this is incredible. He's going to lose his mind." "You've been working on this for how long?" "Almost 3 months," I said quietly. He laughed. "You're unreal." I can't wait to see his face. Guests trickled in, all of them unaware of the shift that had happened behind the scenes. I moved through the room like a hostess, but I felt like a ghost in my own story. I greeted everyone with grace, even his mother, even Megan. They arrived together, too cheerful. Megan wore red, it felt deliberate. His mother handed me a small wrapped gift and said, "You've outdone yourself." But her eyes didn't match her words. They looked restless, almost afraid. I didn't offer explanations. I simply nodded. Silence, I've found, unnerves people more than anger ever could. The restaurant doors opened again. Josh walked in late. He was dressed well, button-down shirt, slacks, but there was no ease in the way he carried himself. He looked around the room, first at the guests, then the photos, the decorations. The live folk duo softly strumming the song he once said reminded him of his father. And then, finally, he saw me. Our eyes met, and something shifted. He stopped mid-step, his mouth parted slightly, but nothing came out. I stood near the collage wall, beside a table of old letters and keepsakes I'd gathered from people in his life. A handmade guest book sat open, half full with messages from friends and mentors, and, next to it was the green folder. Open. He walked slowly to the table, eyes moving from the letters to the emails, the RSVP list, the vendor deposit receipts. Rob approached him with a grin, clapping his shoulder. "Man, your wife went all out. Seriously, you have no idea what she pulled together. She even tracked down Peter from Seattle. When's the last time you saw him?" Josh didn't answer. He looked down at the table again. And this time, his hands trembled just slightly. Another guess, someone from his teaching department, looked from the collage to the setup and then at Josh. "You thought she was cheating while she was doing all this?" he said softly, half joking, half horrified. The room quieted. Not a dramatic pause, just an eerie stillness. No one spoke. Even the band stopped playing, sensing something that had slipped beneath the surface. Josh glanced at his mother, then Megan. Neither of them said a word. Megan turned to examine the drink table, suddenly fascinated by the lemonade pitcher. His mother looked down at her folded hands, and that was it. No apology, no confrontation, just truth, floating in the open. I didn't defend myself. I didn't cry or ask if he understood now. There was nothing left to explain. Because the proof wasn't in my words, it was in the room. In the faces of people who saw me, in the love I had poured into every small detail. I picked up my clutch, walked over to the coat rack, and slipped my arms into my jacket, slowly. Josh turned toward me. "Aaron," I paused, met his eyes, and nodded once, then I walked out. Not with drama, not with fury, but with every ounce of self-respect I had spent years silencing in the name of being understood. And as the restaurant door shut quietly behind me, I realized something. You can spend your life trying to be believed, or you can spend it being yourself, even if no one's watching. That night, I chose the latter. The days after the party were quiet. Not the kind of silence you dread, just the kind that wraps itself around you when you're finally too tired to explain yourself anymore. I didn't go home right away. I stayed with my friend Claire for a few days. She made space for me without asking questions, which was exactly what I needed. I didn't cry much. I didn't scream. I didn't even talk about him unless she brought him up gently. And even then, I kept my answers short. I think that's something people misunderstand about heartbreak. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just stillness. The sound of your own breath in a room that's too clean. A dinner plate set for one without needing to be. I started therapy not because I was unraveling, but because I didn't want to start over without understanding how I got here. I didn't want bitterness to be the only thing I carried forward. My therapist didn't rush me. She let me sit in the pauses. Let me name things I had never given voice to. How often I had chosen peace over my own discomfort. How I had swallowed unfairness just to keep others comfortable. How I'd tied my worth to being needed, then being known. A few weeks after the party, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Josh. It was 4 pages, folded carefully. He apologized. Said he knew now what the party was, what it had meant. Said he didn't know how to say sorry for trusting the wrong people, but that he had. And that he hated himself for it. He said he hadn't realized how easy it had been to doubt me because I was always so composed. That he had confused quiet for coldness, and that he saw, now, how much love had gone unspoken because it had been shown instead. I read the letter twice. I placed it on the kitchen counter. And then, slowly, I slid it into a drawer and walked away. I didn't write back. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted to punish him. But because trust isn't a story you write your way back into. It's a story you choose to protect. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped protecting ours. I think people expect a big moment at the end of a betrayal, a final confrontation. A shouted truth, a door slammed shut. But for me, it was a quiet morning, standing by my window, coffee in hand. Realizing I didn't miss him anymore. I missed who I thought he was. But not who he turned out to be. And I missed who I used to be in that relationship. Before I started, shrinking myself to fit into a space someone else's family had built too small for me, I took small steps. I redecorated the guest room. I gave away the wine glasses we got as wedding gifts. I went on long walks with no destination and let the silence tell me things I hadn't been ready to hear before. I stopped answering calls from his mother. She tried twice. Once to ask if I was doing okay, and once strangely to tell me that Megan had just gotten engaged. I told her I wished them well. And then I stopped picking up. Not because I needed revenge, but because some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They just need to be gently closed. And now I live a life that feels wide, spacious, not always happy, but honest. I have fewer people around me, but the ones who stay see me for who I am, not just for what I offer. And I've learned not to mistake silence for peace. Not to confuse being liked with being loved. Not to keep earning loyalty from people who hand theirs to whoever talks the loudest. I still believe in love, but I also believe in boundaries now. In saying, this is enough. And more importantly, I am enough. The gift I thought I was giving him, the party, the celebration, the act of love, it wasn't for him, not really. It was the version of myself I had been waiting to share. The woman who plans with care, who loves with intention, who notices the smallest things and makes them beautiful. And if he couldn't see that, it's because he was never looking in the first place. Turns out, the gift wasn't the party. It was seeing who they really were. And who I finally became.